Curious George and the Pizza Parties. George was a good little monkey, and always very curious. Today he wasn't just curious, he was excited. So excited, in fact, that he was turning flips and standing on his head. A little girl in George's building had invited him to her pizza party. George had never been to a pizza party before, but he had loved parties and he had loved pizza, so he knew it had to be good. To George, it's a pizza party. Day Saturday time, 4 p.m. Place, apartment 2. George, it's time for the pizza party, said the man with the yellow hat. Have fun and remember to be on your best behavior. George got to the party in perfect time. Hi, George, called out the little girl. But oh, what was all of this? The children were wearing puffy white chef hats and checkered aprons. George got a hat and an apron too. The best was yet to come. They weren't just going to eat pizza, they were going to make it too. Everyone will get a piece of pizza dough to roll out and make a special pizza, explained the girl's mother. There were many little lumps of dough. But first, let's play some games, she said. Everyone went into the living room to pin the pepperoni on the pizza. Everyone, that is, except George. He was curious about the pieces of dough. George thought and thought, if lots of little pieces of dough were good, maybe a huge one would be even better. He gathered lumps of dough together and squished them until it became the very biggest piece of dough he had ever seen. What fun! Maybe rolling it out would be even more fun. George poured flour out on the table. He rolled and rolled and rolled the dough with the rolling pin. It was messy work. First he bumped over one of the chairs. Crash! Then he knocked the stack of flour. Thump. The flour looked like snow laying on the floor of the kitchen. George liked snow, so he didn't mind at all. Soon he gotten the dough nice and thin. But the thinner it got, the farther it spread out. Before he knew it, the dough covered the table, then the chairs, then George. Without the flour, it started to stick to everything, including George. George stopped to think, maybe the dough will be better off in small pieces after all. George got a pair of scissors and began cutting up the dough into lots of different shapes. He thought everyone would be pleased. George, what have you done to the kitchen? The little girl's mother didn't look very happy. I think it's time for you to go home now. How surprised and sad George was. Just then the children burst into the kitchen. They saw the mess that George had made. George, what happened? Asked one boy. The other children looked at the shapes that George had made with wide eyes. Wow, George, I've never seen pizza dough like that before, said the little girl, smiling. Well, said her mother, if you can clean up this mess quickly, George, I suppose you can still stay to make a pizza. The children all helped George clean the kitchen. He was lucky to have so many good friends. As they worked, they talked about they talked about the pizza. I'm going to make a pizza that looks like a star, said one little boy. I'm going to make a pizza that looks like a house, said the girl. Once the kitchen was clean, the real fun began. All of the children picked out perfect pieces of dough and got to work. They spooned on tomato sauce and sprinkled on cheese. They added lots of vegetables and pepperoni. The pizzas looked wonderful. One looked like a rainbow, others like a stop sign, and still another like a balloon. There were even pizzas that looked like Curious George. Well, George, said the little girl's mother, the pizzas taste great, and thanks to you, they look wonderful too. Everyone agreed. It was the best pizza anyone had ever seen or tasted. For the second time that day, George was so happy he turned flips and stood on his head. Of course, it was a little harder to turn flips with so much pizza in his belly, but George didn't mind. It had been a wonderful pizza party. The end. What was your favorite part of the story? My favorite part of the story is where he made a big mess but actually made the pizzas look so pretty. This book is Curious George, A Home for Honeybees. George and Steve like to build things. You two are good builders, like bees, said Betsy. George was curious. Bees could build things? Bees make honeycombs inside their hives to store honey, Betsy said. She gave some to George and Steve to taste. Betsy showed them her poster from Earth Day. Bees build hives in trees to lay their eggs and store honey. All the bees follow a queen bee. She's the biggest bee in the hive. Worker bees go to flower, getting nectar and pollen to make honey. But the honeycomb was very sweet. When Betsy left for dance class, George and Steve ate the whole thing. They needed to find more honeycomb. George and Steve went to the park to look for a beehive tree. Be careful! Bees can sting, Steve said. George could not find the hive, but he found something else. He saw a beekeeper at the Earth Day festival in the park. This is a beehive, the beekeeper said. I built it myself. It works the same way as a hive in a tree. The bees make honeycomb for the forms in the top box. The box on the bottom is where the queen bee lives and lays her eggs. You can build your own beehive, the beekeeper said. Then you can get more honeycomb. They went back to George and Steve's house to get started. Steve drew plans for the hive. George thought building boxes would take a long time. George tried to use straws. Some straws didn't fit together. But the kitchen cabinet would make a great beehive. Surely the man with the yellow hat would not mind. George knew where to get frames. He and Steve put all the parts together. Their beehive was ready to go back to Betsy's house. Now they needed to find some bees. George had an idea. Maybe if their hive had flowers, the bee would move in. But just then, Betsy came home. I'm sorry we ate all your honeycomb, said Steve. We built you a hive to make more. Steve and George were worried. Betsy would be angry, but instead she looked happy. This is the best present ever, Betsy said. Besides, the piece of honeycomb was for you. I've got lots more. What a relief. Betsy's project was not ruined, and there was more honeycombs. Everyone was happy. Well, almost everyone. The end. What is your favorite part of the story? My favorite part of the story is where they said, well, almost everyone.